Okay.
Well, welcome everyone, and hello, and thanks for joining us here in person at the Susquehanna Art Museum, and also on chat or on Zoom rather. We are excited to co-host this community engagement forum about LGBTQ plus youth and multi-generational housing with the Lancaster LGBTQ Coalition. I would also like to acknowledge our national partner, SAGE, founded in 1978 to provide advocacy and services for LGBTQ elders. Members of their staff have been instrumental in identifying model projects to showcase and in advising us about the process of developing LGBTQ friendly housing. I'm Barry Loveland, he, him, his pronouns. I'm chair of the LGBT Center of Central Pennsylvania History Project, and I'm also a volunteer serving on a special task force to explore the possibilities of developing housing for LGBTQ seniors and other generations in Central Pennsylvania. This is the second of two community forums, and the first one focused on housing for LGBTQ elders. This forum will present information and case studies of LGBTQ youth and multi-generational housing developments from around the country, and to hear from community members about what they would like to see done locally to create more options for LGBTQ people in housing and related services. Early next year, we'll begin a needs assessment process with the local LGBTQ community. The results will factor into a new strategic plan for the LGBT Center of Central PA and into future planning for the Lancaster LGBTQ Coalition. We will be seeking various partners who are interested in working with us on this vision, including developers, service providers, elected officials, funding sources, and governmental agencies. We're also seeking more volunteers willing to join our task force. Please be aware that while we are taking a serious look at these issues, we cannot guarantee that this process will lead to the creation of one or more development projects of new housing in Central Pennsylvania, or that projects will be completed in any specific period of time. If you're attending over the Zoom, we ask that you please put your questions or comments in the chat. If you're participating in person, please write your question or comment using the paper and pen supplied here at the venue and hand them into the moderator when you are ready. And please print legibly. So the first presenter we have today is Andrew Palomo, he, him pronouns. Andrew is a native of the Lehigh Valley, although slowly becoming a Midwesterner after living in Chicago for the last 6 years. He is passionate about creating and implementing community-wide collaboratives that involve the voices and perspectives of young people with the lived experiences of homelessness. He has 20+ years of experience working in the youth housing field. Most recently, he was the Director of Community Strategy at the National Network for Youth, which is a nonprofit organization that advocates for the rights and needs of young people who are homeless or at risk of becoming homeless. He's also worked with Valley Youth House in Pennsylvania, where he served as the supervisor of runaway and homeless youth programs and oversaw the implementation of an LGBT drop-in center in Allentown, Pennsylvania. Andrew will provide an overview of needs, including the housing challenges facing LGBTQ youth and young adults, lessons learned, promising practices, and resources available. So Andrew, welcome.
Thank you for that introduction, and thank you for inviting me to have this discussion with you all. Also love to see some of the colleagues that I've worked with in other capacities. So Kay in Lancaster, been working with them for the past year, and really excited to see just things like continuing there. So I'm just gonna share my screen, and hopefully everything goes smoothly here. Gonna give that broad overview of LGBT homelessness, and then some of those best practices and some of the resources that are available for all of you. first I want to start with like what are the numbers? Like what does the data say about youth and young adult homelessness? So we know that 1 in 10 young adults ages 18 to 25 experience homelessness in a 12-month period. This was a study conducted by the University of Chicago's Chapin Hall, which is a large think tank here in Chicago, and they did the nation's largest study on youth and young adult homelessness. And that equates, that 1 in 10 adults, young adults, equates to about 3.5 million young people in the United States. 1 in 30 youth ages 13 to 17 experience homelessness over a 12-month period. Again, that's about 700,000 young people ages 13 to 17 in the United States experiencing homelessness. So that's in Pennsylvania. So if I take those numbers and multiply it to the number of young people ages 13 to 17 in Pennsylvania, that would be an estimate of almost 25,000 youth who are experiencing homelessness in Pennsylvania. Again, if we multiply that 1 in 10 number to the number of young adults in Pennsylvania, that's 130,000 young people, or a total of 156,000 young people could be homeless, or the estimates of homelessness in Pennsylvania. That's larger than like the city of Allentown, which is like the 3rd largest metro, right? Or the 3rd largest city in Pennsylvania. So that is a staggering number, right? Most of those cities cities and towns in Pennsylvania are not don't even reach that number, right? But that's how many young people are estimated to be homeless by Chapin Hall. And then in some studies, about 40% of young people who are experiencing homelessness identify as being in the LGBT community. So what's 40% of 156, right? That's a huge number, right? Like we're talking about anywhere between like 40 to 50,000 young people or LGBT identified young people experiencing homelessness in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, right? So, and we know that like in some of the other sectors, like in education and in the homeless crisis center, they're not even seeing this number. But you all who are on the ground level, I hear this all the time from people on the ground level. They're like, yes, that number seems accurate because we're constantly seeing a need. So that's just something to observe. And why is this, right? Like, why do we see this? Unfortunately, there's so many different definitions at the federal level. I'm only glossing over this because I could give a whole lecture in an hour about the three different definitions, but it creates a fragmented system, right? So it creates this system where young people are unable to access services because they don't meet this definition. So the Department of Education, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, also known as HUD, and then the Department of Health and Human Services. All those 3 different federal agencies have different definitions. So it just it compounds to the problem that we see that's going on in our country. So why do young people who identify as LGBT experience homelessness? So this is probably not new to any of you on this call, but I just wanted to share, right? The primary reason is family conflict, but it's not the only reason, right? Like, so I think that is something to really take away from this graph, that True Colors United did this study about like why we're what led you to being homeless. So among LGBTQ young people, right, like family issues was forced out or run away was their primary issue, and family issues is a second. The same with people are transgender individuals as well. But one of the things that's really striking in this is just also poverty, right? Is another factor, right? Like that people were identifying as being another reason what led them to homelessness. So just a graphic to just show like what young people are experiencing. This graph shows some of the experiences young people have. The light orange are young people who identify as LGBTQ. The darker color is non-LGBT young folk. So we see that like a lot of these risk factors are are higher for our LGBT young folk compared to non-LGBT youth, right? So you could just like look at those numbers, right? Like forced to have sex, 38% of the survey respondents indicated that they were forced to have sex, while only 15 of non-LGBT young people. Physical harm, our young people were experiencing physical harm at higher rates, exposed to discrimination and stigma at higher rates, right? So these are things that we know that our young people are experiencing and why they need these services. So some of these best practices, right? So I know I have 10 minutes, so I'm cramming 20 years of my experience all into these 10 minutes. So, but one of the best practices, right, is what is called in the youth field positive youth development, right? And how do we operationalize this into our programming? And PYD or positive youth development is a mindset that creates, provides, and uses opportunity to create meaningful experiences for becoming a positive, competent, and contributing adult, right? So how do we create these spaces where young people are going to achieve their full potential, right? And why do we do this, right? And I think this is the critical reason why youth and young adult programs are different than adult programs. And the main reason is brain development, right? So that frontal lobe does not develop until we're like 25, 26. And our frontal lobe is the decision-making process of us, right? Like we make decisions based on that frontal lobe. So we're making our life-changing decisions and in that frontal lobe, and we're asking a 17-year-old to make those decisions when that part of the brain isn't developed, right? So I think that is why youth and young adult programming is distinctly different, and why housing, right, looks a little bit different for youth and young adults, because they're not making those decisions the same way as an adult does. And this is from brain development, and why brain development is so crucial in the youth and young adult housing field, because all of us, right, when we were 17, when we were 18 or 19, we probably didn't listen to our parents. We probably made poor choices. I made poor choices, right? Like I'll speak for myself, right? Like I made some poor choices as when I was 17, right? I think I ran away to some party in the Jersey Shore for like 3 days without telling my parents, right? And so, but fortunately, I had that support system. Our young people who lack those support systems are making these decisions. My parents rescued me, right? Like they came and like, yes, I was grounded for a month. But for our young people, sometimes the consequences are much more severe. And that's why our programming needs to be a little bit more flexible and being able to accommodate like what we see is normal adolescent development. Another promising another best practice is having youth action boards, right? We need to listen to young people as to what are their needs and what do they need as a program. This is actually the youth action board I created in Allentown, the first youth action board for the LGBT drop-in center. At the time, I worked collaboratively with the Bradbury Sullivan Center, and we created this drop-in space for young people. And it was all youth-led. Young people were involved. They were involved in how the center looked. They were involved in the programming, decisions, etc. So this is actually the first YAB. It was a small group. And actually just shout out to Chloe, who's the person in the middle behind that flag. They were actually our youth action board member, and now they're the program supervisor at there. So of Project Silk Lehigh Valley. So shout out to to the work that they're doing in Allentown for young people experiencing homelessness. But a youth action board, if you don't have one, like, create one, because like that's how if you talk to Chloe, having that youth action board guide the decisions of your program helps a lot in getting young people in and getting young people to stay into your services. So, and these are just some of the things that they've done, like, right, having Vogue night, meeting young people where they're at, what are their needs, what is it that they want as programming, right? So they had Vogue night, they had like time at the gym, they have young people do webinars. So all of that is youth led. So that's definitely a promising best practice. There are federal grants that do allow for you to have programming, like housing programs, like for homeless young people, for shelters, or even transitional living programs. So I wanted to put those out there, from street outreach to basic center, and you can target this to LGBT young people. They do come out in May through FISB, the Federal Family, Youth, and Service Bureau puts out these RFPs out like May, June. And they are really successful. Like they have 90% success rates for young people going into their own housing, right? So just they're really good programs to have. There's not a lot of them. And then also just, I'm wrapping up because I'm like already at 10 minutes. I also do consulting. So if you want to apply for any of these, feel free to reach out to me, right? Like feel free to reach out. I will definitely help any of you. Pennsylvania is near dear to my heart. It's where my home, I still consider it home. So just putting that out there, I am going to share links, right? So the Family, Youth, and Service Bureau website, it shows like where in PA some of these programs are at. Unfortunately, most of them are either in State College, Erie, the Lehigh Valley, and Philadelphia. And then, but Pennsylvania is so large. But yes, so the funding opportunities and the grants are there. And these are housing programs for all of you. And then the other thing is I have a link to your COC, the Continuum of Care, which is HUD's programs for housing. If you're not involved in your continuum of care, I would say like that is another best practice of being out there and being the voice and shaking the tree. I always say in our world, the squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? So if you're there making raising the voice that we need more housing for young people experiencing homelessness, the better. I put the link. I did make it shareable for everyone in there. So feel free. I also put my email in that link. So that way you have my contact information. Feel free to contact me. I ran through this in 10 minutes and I can, Amanda knows I can speak hours on this. So with that, I will pass it on. So, and hopefully your eyes are not glazed over.
Thank you so much, Andrew. That was a great overview, and I know there's a lot more information that we can pick your brain about later and work with you. So we're appreciative of that. So next up, we have our first panel, which is for youth housing models. And we are pleased to have two speakers who represent organizations or development projects in LGBT youth plus housing and services. First, I'd like to introduce Ciora Thomas. Ciora is a Pittsburgh native and the executive director of Sisters PGH. Ciora founded the nonprofit in 2013 because of her own struggles as a teenage homeless sex worker, surviving with a system that feeds off trans youth homelessness, drug addiction, and transphobia. Sisters PGH advocates for social and economic justice for transgender and gender nonconforming Black, Indigenous people of color within the Allegheny County area, and operates Pittsburgh's only trans-owned community center. The organization offers rent and utility support, medical and mental health referrals, self-affirming groups, the TGNC Youth Collective for Trans Youth to organize and find fellowship, and Project T, a groundbreaking temporary housing initiative. Ciora is also the founder and lead organizer of People's Pride, PGH, an alternative pride event in Pittsburgh. Ciora is the first Black trans woman to serve as chair of the LGBTQIA Advisory Council of Pittsburgh and on the Pennsylvania Commission for LGBTQ Affairs and on the board of Pittsburgh Action Against Rape. She has been honored with multiple awards and recognitions. Welcome, Ciora.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. And I am going to share my screen if that's okay.
Yes.
Awesome. Okay. All right. So yes, thanks again so much for having me. And I'll again try to get through my 10 minutes fast too. I can talk. So who is Sisters PGH? So we are a Black trans-led 501c3 nonprofit organization that serves queer, trans, Black, Indigenous people of color in Southwestern PA. I always highlight that we are the only Black trans woman-led organization functioning at our capacity in the state of Pennsylvania. Although we are working hard to support other growing organizations that are Black trans-led, it's important to know, the landscape in the state of Pennsylvania and where we are. So a few things that we offer. So, and I'm going to get a little bit into Project T a little later. But Project T is our translated transitional housing program, something we bought a home 3 years ago, and we were able to turn that home into a transitional space for specifically trans people, even more specifically Black and Brown trans people in Pittsburgh and Allegheny County who suffer from homelessness at a higher rate, even within our LGBTQ cisgender community. So we offer currently 7 beds. We've are 7 beds in that space. We've been able to get, again, specifically Black and Brown trans people through that program into their own permanent housing, which has been the ultimate goal. So they're not continuously navigating the nonprofit industrial complex for the rest of their lives. This happens to a lot of our trans members who are navigating nonprofits within the community when they become lifetime members, essentially, of the organization, which turns into elders also needing, continuing to need these resources. So our values at Sisters PGH has always been a part of those values is ensuring that our young people, and again, specifically we serve our trans folks, are not generationally marginalized within the nonprofit industrial complex, thus having them graduate throughout our program into a more permanent, independent basis. The age that we have been serving since opening this program has been from 18 to 23. Now, this does not mean that we have not been receiving inquiries from those who have been 13 to 18, trans people and trans young people in Pittsburgh and Allegheny County that are looking for emancipation and housing because they are living in an abusive household that is not accepting of them being trans. Thus, turning them into being homeless as well. So we're catching those that are falling through the cracks, even through the cracks of the LGBTQ cisgender leadership nonprofit nonprofits that are servicing trans people diligently and respectfully, but may not know how to adequately serve trans people. And that's where we also come in to support our local nonprofits in the area to ensure that our partners and those that we continue to work with can also provide adequate care for specifically transgender people in our area. So another thing that we offer is rent and utility support. I'm sure all of us know, because of low wages and employment discrimination in our area, our TLGBTQ communities are unable to find gainful employment and or keep housing. So for LGBTQ people, housing discrimination is a big problem. A 2007 study from the Urban Institute found that landlords told gay men about fewer available apartments than straight men and quoted them higher rent for these apartments. And I just wanted to add, in addition, our transgender folks are experiencing this at a higher rate. And I'm probably going to say a higher rate a lot through this, because this year we have really been tapping into our data collection as an organization. We've been collecting data for years, since we started the organization in 2017, but as marginalized people, we didn't know how to use it. So we've brought in the right people into our organization to help us disseminate that. And we hope within the next year to have some more formidable data on trans people of all races within Pittsburgh and Allegheny County to present to our nonprofits in Pennsylvania, just to see what's going on around here. But in addition, in another 2015 study, 23% of transgender people reported that they had experienced housing discrimination, like being evicted or denied a rental in the past year because of their gender identity. And in the Philadelphia region, at least 40% of people aged 18 to 26 who experience homelessness identify as LGBTQ. So a few other programs that we offer. Again, I'm just going to skim through these because I have 10 minutes and I can talk forever about these programs. But we have Brothers PGH, which centers the experiences and voices of trans men and young trans boys in our area, that provides them a space to be activists, artists, creators, anything that comes to mind, for them to exist in this space. Again, we are a trans-led organization, so it's always been fundamental to us to branch out. You'll notice our logo is a tree, so it's always been fundamental for us to be the roots for our trans community so that they can branch out and bear the fruits of their labor, in essence. So, we provide the support for them to do that. Our TGNC Youth Collective is a group of young activists who are on the ground, doing the work to ensure that we have legislation that represents us, to ensure that we have representatives that represent us, in our area. And who not better to lead the charge but our young trans people who are investing their young lives into doing that. As a younger person, that was all of my life as a 15 through up to my mid-20s, and sometimes these days, but activating and organizing within community and showing them how important it is. So we have our emergency support. So this looks like different things. We provide emergency shelter through different various programs we have within our organization, as well as emergency call-in. So they can call us after hours if something is going on and reach someone to get support. This is normally for who usually utilizes this is our sex workers. We are a very sex positive organization. And we are always in support of our sex workers when they need support from us. So we're there for that. We have a drop-in center in a borough of Pittsburgh called Swissville. It's a trans-inclusive drop-in center where trans people can come interact with our staff. I have a staff of 3 right now who I also identify as trans and non-binary and Black. And they're able to come into the organization to interact with our staff and join our programs or just hang out. We have a hangout space for folks to come hang out and use the computer lab as well. We're program-centric, but we're also youth-centric, adult-centric, senior-centric, where we are creating spaces where the folks that we serve can create the space, in essence, and let us know what the need is, which provides us a needs assessment in that way as well, as we are working annually. So this drop-in center is open through Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. We've been discussing doing some PM hours, but right now that's where we are. We also offer our name change project. So this has been essential for helping our trans communities connect with the name change project. We've been partnering with TILDF to provide a space that when trans people come to get their name changed, they see other trans people. It's so, so important that trans people are seeing people that look like them within the nonprofit realm. And that has been essential to us being able to not only activate our community, but be a huge support system of the work that we're doing here in Pittsburgh and Allegheny County. We've been very successful with the name change project and continuing moving forward to providing the resource and development for the name change project for those that we serve. As mentioned in my bio, we also offer an alternative pride event. Years and years ago, when I was a kid, Pride was very segregated in Pittsburgh, where Black and brown folks were not safe in Pittsburgh Pride. And we had created an alternative Pride that centered the lives and experiences of Black and brown LGBTQIA people in Pittsburgh and Allegheny County, which was very successful and has continued to be successful as we are now working in different boroughs around the city to give them their very first prize. In predominantly Black and brown neighborhoods. So homelessness in the LGBTQIA community and youth. So according to the William Institute, 40% of homelessness youth, which was mentioned earlier, identifies LGBTQ+. Between 500,000 and 1.6 million youth in America experience homeless each year. A study of more than 350 runaway and homeless providers throughout the U.S. are found for top causes for homelessness among queer and trans youth. One, family rejection, as was also mentioned earlier. Family rejection resulting from sexual orientation or gender identity, physical and emotional or sexual abuse, aging out of foster care systems, which is something we catch as well as an organization, trans folks aging out of foster care systems, and for financial and emotional neglect. So homelessness in LGBTQ+ adults. So sexual minority adults are twice as likely as the general population to have experienced homelessness in their lifetime. A higher proportion of transgender people report experiencing recent homelessness than sexual minority or cisgender straight people. The majority of sexual minority people experience homelessness for the first time as an adult. Now, what's needed? So for what I've seen in my years and years of work, and I've been doing this work since I was 15 years old. I'm 35 now. Still relatively young, but I've learned a lot, in my time living. So street outreach is huge, and it's a huge help. Homeless shelters, more of those. But homeless shelters that are representing the people that they are serving. So it's so essential that they are seeing trans people in these spaces, they are seeing LGBTQ cisgender people in these spaces for camaraderie of understanding. Transitional living programs and other housing programs and services should be free of bias and harassment and provide access to culturally competent service that affirm LGBTQ+ identities. I can tell you how many times trans people come to our center who are going to the traditional shelters in our area who are having the most horrible experiences within those shelters. So, we have to make sure that we're also doing the work to work with these folks so that they can have more affirming spaces. Analyze how staff are screened before being hired, provide professional development to current staff. Care must be trauma-informed. Connect youth to community resources and services that are affirming and safe. Expand public awareness about queer youth issues and decrease stigma associated with their identities. On the criminal justice system, so Black and Latino people, people with disability and members of the LGBTQ+ community are disproportionately represented in the criminal justice system. This is especially true for trans people and queer women. And while incarcerated individuals are subjected to particularly inhumane conditions and treatment. I'm sure we've all heard plenty of horror stories about how our siblings are treated in jail. These formerly incarcerated people also then typically return to low-income communities where affordable, accessible housing is scarce. This is currently a national shortage of 7 million affordable rental units available to extremely low income. And I'm sure when I say housing prices, that's going to resonate with everyone on this call. Because we are also experiencing a housing crisis in Pittsburgh and Allegheny County. And trans people, even more specifically, have been experiencing a housing crisis before Stonewall, after Stonewall, and continue to experience a housing crisis at a higher rate, even than our LGBTQIA cisgender comrades. All right. So on our criminal records, let's talk about that a bit. I hope I'm good on time. I'm talking fast. I hope I am good on time. So for LGBTQ plus people with a criminal record, discrimination based on the record combined with already high rates of discrimination can make finding employment and housing even more challenging. Given the harassment, violence, and disproportionate discipline that queer students experience in educational settings, combined with high rates of discrimination in the workplace, programs that allow those with a criminal record to pursue education are incredibly important. Let me move this here. State commonly place some restrictions on the ability of people to change their names due to concerns about fraud and evasion of law enforcement. For trans people with criminal records, these restrictions can create hurdles to rebuilding one's life. I just want to make sure I'm on time here. Okay, no warnings. I think I'm good. All right. And I think that's what I have. I'm going to go to my stop share. All right. So yeah, thank you again. Thank you all for having me. I am going to pop to our, if you give me a second to get out of this. All right. I am going to share my screen one more time and just pop to our website really quick. So this is where you can find more information about Sisters PGH. We're just simply sisterspgh.org. Most of our programs are highlighted in our programs tab. Our website is pretty accessible. If you know anyone that is experiencing, or someone trans that is experiencing homelessness, they can go directly to our website to enroll in any of our programs, or seek out anything that we can support our siblings with. Please get them to our website. And before I close out, I do want to just go really quick to some data we collected during COVID-19. So in Pittsburgh, during COVID-19, we were the first organization that started raising funds for the LGBTQ community in Pittsburgh. We raised, oh my gosh, I don't have that directly in front of me, but we've raised a little over $500,000 collectively, working with some organizations. And we were able to get a needs assessment from that, which was so important because we already knew our community was heightened and needing resources, but to be able to find, that these needs, and something we already knew, but were exacerbated during the COVID-19 pandemic. So I just wanted to share this for you all to come here to visit this space on our website, just to learn what you can from it. We took a lot from it because we live here, but if this is something that you were also experiencing in your area, it could be something beneficial, for you as well. So thank you for having me. I look forward to any questions you might have at the end. And yeah.
Thank you so much, Theora, for your really informative and inspiring presentation. That was really great. Our next speaker is Carl Kunda, he, him pronouns. Carl is Vice President of Supportive Housing at Full Circle Communities, covering projects in Michigan and Illinois, and leads the organization's supportive and integrative supportive housing development and best practices. Carl led the development of the Ruth Ellis Claremont Center in Detroit that created 42 units of supportive housing for LGBTQ plus youth, and originated the Raymond E. Shepherd House in Ferndale, which will bring 53 units of integrated supportive housing for LGBTQ elders. He is also working in Chicago to bring an intergenerational LGBTQ plus housing development to the city's south side. In this presentation, he will talk about the Ruth Ellis Claremont Center for Housing for LGBTQ plus youth. And he'll be back in a little while to talk about the project in Chicago too. So, Carl, take it away.
Thanks for the introduction, Barry, and thank you everyone for having me this evening to talk with you. Always excited to lift up the really exciting work that we get to do with incredible partners like the Ruth Ellis Center. And thank you, Amanda, for helping me advance through the slides for this presentation. So I'll get started. I want to first talk about the Ruth Ellis Claremont Center, which is a mixed use permanent supportive housing development for LGBTQ identified youth in the city of Detroit, which opened in September of 2022. Fortunately, we can probably skip the next slide since our first two presenters did such a great job of kind of teeing up the issues for LGBTQ homeless youth and why we need projects like the Claremont Center. I think the only thing I would add is that the official data that we use to assess the problem of homelessness is very likely undercounting the problem because the existing services and housing supports treat this population so poorly that they actively avoid it. So we know that even though we're already seeing overrepresentation in the overall youth population, we know from on the ground work with the community that the real number is actually higher. I'll first introduce our incredible partners at the Ruth Ellis Center. So the image that you see is actually a 4-story mural of Ruth Ellis herself on the building, which we were fortunate to be able to do. Ruth was an amazing person. She was born in 1899 in the city of Detroit. She lived her life as an out lesbian in the 30s and 40s, also as a Black business owner, which was also uncommon. And along with her partner, Babe, was a beacon for the LGBTQ community long before any of the advances that we now enjoy, and was a lifelong activist to advance the LGBTQ cause in Metro Detroit. She celebrated her 100th birthday at the grand opening of the Ruth Ellis Center in Highland Park. And the organization continues to honor her name with the work that they do. The Ruth Ellis Center is a nonprofit youth service provider. They serve youth as young as 14. Their core services include a drop-in center. This is a safe space where youth are able to access things like safer sex supplies or other harm reduction supplies, hot meals or food to go, hygiene and beauty kits. There's a computer lab, there's a free laundry room, there's a clothes closet. They can engage in peer supports and other group therapies. And there's also, their headquarters is actually based in a converted vaudeville theater. So there's actually a huge upstairs practice space for youth that are involved with the Detroit ballroom scene, which is very cool to see. The Ruth Ellis Center also offers behavioral health services like case management and mental health programming. They have a robust juvenile justice diversion program and a growing art therapy program. In collaboration with Henry Ford Health, which is the largest hospital in Detroit, they also offer population-specific health services for persons living with HIV, as well as gender-affirming care. And then finally, an area where they've probably grown the most since we met them back in 2015 is their housing programs. So when I first met with them, they offered family preservation programming and also a residential youth foster care facility. But now, through the Youth Homelessness Demonstration Project, can offer things like rapid rehousing for the LGBTQ youth. They run a scattered site permanent supportive housing program, including for survivors of human trafficking. And now with the opening of the Claremont Center, a single site permanent supportive housing development. On the next slide, I'll talk about my organization very quickly. So Full Circle, the organization that I work with, we are a nonprofit developer, owner, and manager of affordable and supportive housing throughout the Midwest. We operate in 3 states currently, Iowa, Illinois, and Michigan, and our headquarters is based here in Chicago. We are very proud of an innovative development model that we run, where we return basically as much as we can back into providing supportive services to the populations that we serve. So at minimum, that's 75% of our developer fee and any ongoing cash flow at a project to support resident programming, because we know that it's more than just providing safe, stable housing. Folks need a lot of other services in order to live the lives that they want to live. On the next slide, this might be a little bit out of order. I'll just talk about the Claremont Center itself. So, like I said, Claremont Center is a mixed-use development. It combines 42 units of permanent supportive housing, a mix of 1 and 2 bedroom units for youth aged 18 to 30. We also have a 43rd unit, which is designed for a live-in peer support specialist. So this is an employee of the Ruth Ellis Center that comes with lived experience. They've gone through many of the things that the youth living in the permanent supportive housing have gone through, and are able to offer a voice and level of support that's separate from the case management team, which I'll talk about in a little bit. I mentioned that the project is mixed use. So on the first floor, we also have a number of pretty cool things co-located with our permanent supportive housing. That includes kind of an open town hall space, which is used for, again, the ballroom community. It's used for community art shows, community meetings, and it's a unifying space for everything going on at the Claremont Center. We have a health and wellness center, which is a second location for that partnership between the Henry Ford Health Center and Ruth Ellis, which includes both their population-specific health services and behavioral health. And then there's also a large art therapy studio. We have a retail pharmacist, which is open to both the community and also in collaboration with the Health and Wellness Center for residents of the building to be able to access prescription services. We have a youth entrepreneurial center, which is a commercial kitchen, which we hope eventually, in addition to food and nutrition programming, will also be able to open up as a community-facing cafe. And then finally, we have some office space for the Ruth Ellis Center itself and the Ruth Ellis Institute. The Ruth Ellis Institute is an initiative of the Ruth Ellis Center to take the best practices that they've developed through their programming so that they can share it more broadly and have an impact now nationally. So they work with everything from local municipalities to other nonprofit organizations that are interested in working with this population and working on these issues to be able to offer their expertise and grow capacity around addressing this problem. I'm sorry, Amanda, if you could go up to the slide that had a bunch of folks kind of huddled around a table. So the creation of the Claremont Center was a long process. I first met with their former executive director in the early April of 2015. And like I said, the project wasn't open until over 7 years later in September of 2022. I would highlight a number of things which kind of influenced, that taking a long time. It's one of the only projects of its kind in the country, and whenever you're trying to do something new and do it with purpose, it involves a lot of intentional work. So this project was grounded in making sure that folks from the community were not only, providing their feedback, but, had a seat at the table and decision-making power about what happened. So we used an integrative, trauma-informed development process that, involved both the building's physical design and even where we located the building in the city of Detroit, as well as our approach to pulling together the supportive services that would be offered to residents of the building, training expectations for site staff, and things like that. It was also, to do housing like this with the available funding sources that exist in this country required quite a bit of systems level change. The one that I would probably lift up as being most helpful in working with the continuums of care and advancements with how we're prioritizing permanent supportive housing for homeless populations, those systems are still, they have a lot of work to do to assess the need for homeless youth as it differentiates itself or presents differently from other populations. Specifically, and probably the most robust or most sophisticated assessment tools we have are for chronically homeless individuals who are much older. But also specifically, the circumstances that LGBTQ youth experience, which make them especially susceptible to some of the things that Andrew and Kiora did such a great job of explaining in their presentation. It also took a long time because significant NIMBY battles for the community to get projects like this approved. But through the perseverance of our incredible partners in the community, at the Ruth Ellis Center, and in fellow travelers in the Detroit community, like the Trans Sisters of Color Project, which is a trans-led organization, we were able to get through all of our approvals and also our funding from the state of Michigan. If you could skip ahead, Amanda, to a photo of the building, I just want folks to look at kind of the rendering, and then we did pretty good on delivering the building close to that drawing. And then on the next slide, I will talk about funding. So the primary source that built this project is, for folks that don't know, is called the Low Income Housing Tax Credit. This is actually a federal resource that creates affordable housing across the country. It's actually administered by the IRS, which is a first red flag of the program for those of you looking to work with it, but did provide the bulk of the funding for this development. We were also fortunate to receive rental assistance from the state of Michigan. We received some support from the city of Detroit through their allocation of home and CDBG funds. We received numerous grants, including the Federal Home Loan Bank of Atlanta's Affordable Housing Program grant, and support from the philanthropic community, specifically the Kresge Foundation and the McGregor Foundation. Finally, we had political support that was able to get us capital dollars. So we owe a tremendous thanks to State Senator Adam Hollier, who secured general program funding from the state of Michigan to build out the first floor of this project. And then finally, very proud and had a huge supporter in Washington through Representative Rashida Tlaib, who was able to secure over $1 million in the last federal budget to help us get over the finish line with completing this project. On the final slide. So here is a picture from one of the best days of my life, the grand opening of the Claremont Center itself. And as you can see in the photo, youth opened the building for us. It's been open since September of 2022. We were fully occupied by the end of the year. The non-residential programming on the first floor completed shortly thereafter in March of 2023. And now all of those services are finally fully open and operational, and some of them are open to the community. And after a year of operations, we're starting to feel comfortable with what we're doing at the Claremont Center. So on the services side, we have a staffing model that includes 3 full-time case management personnel, each with their own independent caseload of youth that live at the project. We have a full-time property manager and a full-time maintenance engineer. They have quite a bit of support of folks working with them on kind of ongoing issues at the project. That includes me and some other staff members at Full Circle, as well as the housing director at the Ruth Ellis Center. Some of the initiatives that we're really proud to have been able to get off the ground since the building has been open includes a resident advisory board. So this is a group of residents of the project that meet twice a month and are compensated for their time to provide feedback on what's going on at the building and what type of services are we offering, what type of services do they want to have, what do they like about what we're doing, and what do we need to change to be in line with the type of community that they want to live in. And then, we have community gardening programming, nutritional programming, and lots of social programming. So at this time of year, quite a bit of holiday meals and other events happening. And tomorrow night, we will also be having a poetry slam. So I guess the final thing I'll talk about, a lot of art at the Claremont Center, which we're really excited about. So that final image, which I haven't explained, is a 2-story interior mural, which was created with the participation of residents living at the building. So if you were to go to the Claremont Center and look at that and then meet with residents up at the building, you would realize that quite a few of the residents greet you whenever you come in the building. So I'll leave it off there. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Carl. That's a very impressive project. We appreciate you sharing that with us. So our next panel is going to be talking about the intergenerational model of housing. And we have 2 speakers. Carl is going to be coming back after Kira speaks, but Kira Pollock is up next as our first speaker in this panel. And Kira is Director of Senior Services and joined the Los Angeles LGBT Center in 2017. Kira oversees residential and non-residential senior services for more than 5,000 senior participants age 50 plus at the Los Angeles LGBT Center. Her responsibilities include oversight of Triangle Square, the nation's first LGBT affirming affordable housing community, the new 8,000 square foot Harry and Jeanette Weinberg Senior Center, and the Eridan Getty Senior Affordable Housing on the center's 1.86 acre intergenerational campus. Since 2018, Kira has served on the Los Angeles County Commission for Older Adults and was vice president of the commission from 2022 to 2023. Kira has a master's degree in social work from Fordham University with a focus on client-centered management and is a licensed clinical social worker in New York State. Welcome, Kira.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for inviting me and talking today. I'm so excited to be here and to be able to share with you a little bit about our campus and our work together. So I'm gonna hope that I can advance my slides effectively. Just see if that's gonna work. Oh, okay, well, that's good too. So just a little bit of background on the Los Angeles LGBT Center. We're the largest LGBT center in the world. We have more than 50,000 visits a month across 10 locations across Los Angeles. We serve a great deal of people kind of across our city. Los Angeles could be its own state theoretically if it needed to be in its own economy. So that's why it's so large in terms of the amount of people here and the work that we do. We provide services across our community in a lot of different areas, but one is medical care. So we have a federally qualified healthcare center. We also have legal services, youth services, cultural arts, pretty much any and all services that you could kind of imagine for the community as a whole through those 10 locations. 3 years ago, we had our final kind of grand opening of our Anita Mae Rosenstein campus, which I'm here to talk a little bit about with you today about. So our campus is almost a full block in Los Angeles, in a very populated area in Hollywood. You'll see it here kind of in front of you. I'll talk a little bit about its design and purpose and process, and as we kind of developed it. Our site plan looks like this, just to kind of give you a sense of it. So we had already had land and process here at our Village at Ed Gould Plaza location, which is our cultural arts hub for Los Angeles for our community. About 15 years ago, we purchased the land for this area, knowing that we were eventually going to try to develop it and work on a strategic plan to look at expanding our services and our programs, really for youth and seniors specifically, because in our community housing and services for these two communities were the thing that was growing the largest and probably the most important as we were looking at overall need for our community here. So as we started to kind of look at developing this piece of land that we had purchased in 2014 for $12.7 million, we hosted a needs assessment similar to what you all are looking at doing. We did listening sessions, and we developed a strategic plan for what we wanted to do. There's a couple things that I want to kind of call out that we identified very early on in our process, both that the needs for housing were very extreme in our area, and folks who maybe pay attention a little bit to Los Angeles know about our homelessness and housing crisis here, which is pretty extensive in Los Angeles. And also that as we talked with both our youth and older adults, which were the primary populations that we wanted to affect in this setting, we learned that they were really excited at the idea of doing things together, talking with each other and learning from each other, but didn't necessarily actually want to live together in the same building. And I know that there's lots of communities and folks that have shared housing across generations, and good for them. I think it's amazing. I think it's a great model to look at. In our community, we kind of determined early on that that wasn't what we wanted to do. We wanted to create a shared space, intergenerational campus, where folks were together but had the opportunity to live separately. I think that was the right call for us. So I'm putting that out as sort of a lessons learned piece. Our older adults go to bed early. They like quiet time and space. And the youth that we serve, are primarily homeless and folks that have had justice involvement and trauma histories and are struggling with just day-to-day lives and learning how to live again and try to get stability. And in that process, there's a lot of things that they're learning and growing from. And the idea of having them live together, I think, wasn't going to be a thing that was going to work for us. And I think that was the right call. That being said, we have lots of opportunities for folks to connect kind of across those generations and talk with each other and work together and do many other things. The cost of our campus as a whole for that entire 1.86 acre campus is $142 million. I put this out because I just wanted to, I know that there's folks on the call who are looking at developing and all of those other kinds of things. Building in Los Angeles is really expensive here. So that is something that our costs were estimated at about $30 million less than they ended up being. So just to give you a sense of it, we also started our process before the pandemic. And then our construction hit in the middle of the pandemic, where we all know that construction costs were astronomical. Things were not coming on ships in the ways that they needed to. A lot of our materials got lost along the way. And that really didn't affect us very well financially, quite honestly. So you never know when a pandemic could hit in your planning. I'll throw that out. And this is just kind of a breakdown of sort of how some of those things played out. So we had tax credits. We had a capital campaign, which netted about $55 million in private donations. And the center itself put in about $14.5 million in our own funds to develop our campus. It was completed in phases. We had our main campus, our youth housing, and then our senior housing finishing last as we kind of did that process over the course of what ended up being longer than we would have liked, again, because of the pandemic process more than anything. The pillars of our work overall, we're looking at a senior center and senior housing, a youth center and youth housing. Our administrative offices are included in our campus. And then we have a number of other settings, which I was kind of excited about Carl's model. It's a little similar to ours in that we have an intergenerational culinary arts workforce training program with a commercial kitchen, a cafe, which is a social enterprise, and we have a variety of events and catering spaces, both as an income driving force and a way to bring community together on this campus. Just some photos so you can get a sense of it. So our youth center is kind of to the right of our campus. It is multi-floored, very large space. We had exceeded our space capacity in our old youth center, and this was a way for us to really develop more beds for that center. It is a drop-in center. We have permanent supportive housing directly across the street in this building. So that's 25 units. The construction costs were about 3.1 million. We chose to develop micro units in this process, and that was purposeful for us. So these are kind of small studio apartments, kind of like dorms almost, for our youth. These are 18 to 24-year-olds as they're transitioning from our emergency shelter beds into permanent supportive housing, in the hopes that eventually they will move on to like full-fledged apartments in their lives and sustainability, so that although it's permanent supportive, our goal would be that folks eventually kind of move on to stability in external housing locations. In our drop-in center, we also have 92 beds of emergency housing and transitional housing, and a lot of other programs for support for our youth, education, employment, mentoring programs. We have a host homes program and a really extensive foster youth services program that we provide support to folks as they're kind of transitioning out of foster care. Our senior housing building cost us $51 million across 9 funding sources. Truly, although we developed it over time, it was almost that we did not have enough money to develop it in the end. So I think there's some lessons learned to just talk about around that. And that was primarily because we were developing affordable housing, although 25 of those units are set aside for homeless older adults. The landscape of affordable housing as we were developing this really shifted drastically in Los Angeles to entirely preference homelessness housing, which made developing affordable housing very difficult for us to find the higher rate tax credits to be able to really make it a more affordable unit building and to really get the capital that we needed to fully develop it. We did end up developing it with private support, again, across 9 funding sources, which is a lot for us to kind of to look at overall. The units, so we have 98 units, they're for 62 plus. We have 1 and 2 bedroom units. Again, 25 of those units are set aside for permanent supportive housing. We take vouchers. It has a community room, laundry facilities, fitness, courtyard parking, all of those different things. Case management, we do provide food Monday through Friday to our older adults through our commercial kitchen and through a grant support through the Department of Aging from the city. It's full, and this is kind of the courtyard of that building and the spaces. It's directly behind our senior center, so that folks come back and forth constantly to use all the services of the senior center. There's a gate because we had to gift the land of the supportive housing from the campus into the affordable housing model. So there's some brief break, but not really, for folks to be able to come back and forth across that campus. In our campus process, we also have a cafe, which is a certified social enterprise. And again, we have a culinary arts education program where we specifically train our youth and seniors together in a 300-hour paid internship training on how to cook, how to develop food, how to produce those meals. And overall, our kitchen supports about 450 meals per day for our youth and our seniors. So that's our senior center, our senior housing buildings, our youth housing, our drop-in center. All of the meals on our campus are provided by our kitchen, and then also for our cafe. We have a variety of group and community spaces for folks, both for things that we do and we support, as well as rental space availability. So this is our Pride Hall location. We can serve about 250 people in this space location for large events and of all sorts and fundraisers and things like that. I did just want to mention, although it's not part of our intergenerational campus, we also have Triangle Square Apartments, which was the first affordable housing senior development in the United States. It was developed 15 years ago, and this past year, the center purchased it outright because we utilized at 15 years of an affordable housing, you have the ability to purchase a building, or it can either move into it not being affordable housing, depending on the covenants that you employed when you first built it, or keep it affordable housing. So we expressed that right. We purchased it outright, so that it is our building. And I think that's something for you all to think about as you're thinking about developing of housing. Is that as you develop it, it's sort of owned like many other things in your lives, through a bank, through investors, through a lot of other things. But we're really happy to be able to say that that we have kind of full control over this building and this process 15 years later, after we were the service provider on site, and we helped with the lease up and did a bunch of other things around this. So it's our building at this moment. That building was completed in 2007 for 21.5 million. So again, you can kind of see the difference in costs in Los Angeles from 21.5 to our $55 million building. They're almost the same size, like they're the same, like they're like 6 units difference, like in terms of space. So again, just the cost of developing affordable housing is much more expensive than it was before. So thanks so much, everyone. Here's my contact information. I'm happy to also put it in the chat, and I'll be here for the Q&A part.
Well, thank you so much, Kira. That's very impressive, and we're all envious. Not of your construction costs, but of your facilities. So our next speaker is Carl is back to talk about Full Circle Communities Partnership with One Roof Chicago in planning. They're in the process of planning for a future multi-generational development project in that city. So Carl, take it away.
Thanks again, Barry. Hi, everyone, again, and thank you again, Amanda, for working the slide deck for me. So I fortunately don't have to do an introduction to who I am or who Full Circle is. The one piece of context that I think is important for understanding how we ended up working with One Roof Chicago here in Chicago is actually another project in the Detroit area. So while we were working with the folks on the Ruth Ellis Center project, word got out to the broader community about what we were doing. And we were approached by a real grassroots kind of coalition of different organizations or just community members that were interested in doing something similar for LGBTQ elders. Flash forward 5 years, and we are actively under construction on the Raymond E. Shepherd House, which is 53 units of integrated permanent supportive housing for LGBTQ elders, which will be located just 5 miles north of the Ruth Ellis Claremont Center in Ferndale, Michigan. And we should be opening in the end of 2024, fingers crossed. As many of you are probably starting to recognize, this is a tight-knit community working in this space, and I think we seek to learn from each other and are inspired by each other to do this type of work in our own communities. So through our work with Ruth Ellis and Raymond E. Shepherd and folks like Sage, about 5 years ago, we were introduced to a group of interested folks in the city of Chicago that at that point had not formed One Roof Chicago, which is a new 501c3 nonprofit organization that's trying to add to the landscape of housing for LGBTQ folks here in the city. On the next slide. So even though Chicago is home to 2 2 developments that serve the LGBTQ community and a handful of sites for LGBTQ youth. Obviously, the problem in this city is much larger than those developments alone can tackle. So One Roof is interested in expanding on what's currently offered, particularly with the lens of multi-generational programming. So bringing together different ends of the LGBT community age spectrum, youth and older adults, to create overlaps on the programming side, creating a home for what are naturally occurring communities of care in the LGBTQ space, as well as potentially exploring opportunities for youth career opportunities as they present for older adults, such as home health aides. I would say the other kind of reason for the One Roof project, so as in many places, the equity of where resources are available in the city of Chicago has a lot of work to do. So where resources do exist for the LGBTQ community are predominantly located on the north side of the city, which is a much wider community than the city as a whole. So the folks working with One Roof are interested in creating a project that starts or attempts to address that and locates resources and housing opportunities where we know that LGBTQ communities of color currently exist and would significantly benefit from having access to those resources as well. The other thing which I think differentiates the One Roof Chicago project from other things in the city, or even from the LA project, is instead of it being one organization, which is sort of a one-stop shop and provides all of the services in-house, Full Circle and One Roof Chicago are working collaboratively together to do this project, but we're also working with currently 3 or 4 other organizations which offer various different pieces to the puzzle, right? To bring, to increase the capacity overall, to be able to bring different organizations to the table at a single site to address this community's needs as well. On the next slide, and a lot of what I talk about is going to be kind of from the perspective of folks that are kind of in the middle of this. And I was happy to hear some of the things that Kiera lifted up as lessons learned, because we have talked with the LA LGBT Center and our benefit from their rich expertise in this space, but also in talking with folks and wrestling with some of these problems, we're also changing some of the initial ideas that this project was oriented around. So I already covered kind of the project's mission. On the next slide, similar to the process that I described for the Ruth Ellis Center project, we really want to ground this in the communities that we intend to serve. We don't want it to be a top-down approach. We want to be listening to the we want to listen to the LGBTQ community. We also want to specifically help address barriers so that persons with lived experience have an important voice on how this comes together. What that's looking like is a multi-year intensive engagement process with various stakeholders, definitely persons with lived experience, other organizations, some of them that are interested in this project, or just other fellow travelers in the Chicago scene that serve these communities, and then youth and elders with various housing statuses as well. They are opining through survey groups, design charrettes, opportunities for co-learning on a variety of things, including the service needs, where the project's going to be located, the building's design, its amenities, its orientation to the various populations that are going to be housed at One Roof, and things like that. We were also fortunate to be selected by Enterprise, which is a national community development financial intermediary, to be part of their Affordable Housing Design Leadership Initiative cohort, which was an intensive community engagement, trauma-informed and integrative design process where we got to work with peer organizations across the country and then also locally on best practices for doing development grounded in an authentic community voice, which was really exciting to be a part of, and has kind of driven the project to I think include community input in a way that was far beyond anything that Full Circle had done before. This slide is sort of titled "To Communities." That phrasing is intended to mean, we're recognizing that there's, potential upsides from doing a multi-generational project of co-locating elders and youth together. That can, be in terms of, bringing together a vulnerable community so that they can weather challenges together. We want to lift up networks and chosen families. We know that there are opportunities potentially to have programming that serves both of these populations, that there's economies of scale by co-locating these in one place. And then also in terms of getting political support and also getting the funding community interested in a project like this, things that are bigger and have exciting ideas like multi-generational populations can help us get us to the project being a reality. But I think as we're listening to folks through this process, we're also being realistic about the distinct needs of each population and are committed that while we do hope to be able to serve both populations at this project, when we're thinking about it, we need to make sure that should one population's part move more slowly, that the senior piece moves first, that can operate independently without relying too much on the youth project to make the whole thing work. So that's been a lot of lessons learned over the past few years. When One Roof chose its name, I mean, that they were being very literal. They wanted the multi-generational project to be under one roof. But where the project kind of exists today is more similar to the LA project, where it's going to be a campus approach with hopefully maybe a physical connection between different wings of the building. On the next slide, exciting kind of progress to share to date. We have, through kind of these very intensive processes of getting feedback, have narrowed down on what the community wants it to be. So it will likely be up to 75 units of affordable housing for LGBTQ elders, co-located with 25 units of permanent supportive housing for youth. We are currently talking with the city of Chicago and aldermen for the Bronzeville community. For those of you that don't live in Chicago, Bronzeville is a storied neighborhood on the south side of the city. It's also where the Obama Presidential Library is just about to open up on. In addition to the housing that we're hoping to do with One Roof, the city is also interested in creating a city senior center. And this one will be a little bit different than other senior centers throughout the city that also offer LGBTQ specific programming. The next 4 slides, I just wanted to throw in so that you kind of get a taste for what our different committees are looking at. So when we're running through different options, folks get to look at different layouts and weigh the pros and cons of like how the physical design or where things are located can play out for the types of things that they want to do. So if option 1 layout and then option 2 layout, a little bit different on where those different things are, how separate specifically the senior and youth pieces are, so that we can maintain peace between those different tribes. And then the next slide just shows on a 3-dimensional level what those options would look like. The next 2 slides just kind of hint at where we're at on the programming. So we're pretty early here. As I said, we have a number of different organizations that we're working with around the table, providing feedback on how these models are going to come together. But currently, the stakeholder group is deliberating on proposals from different service providers to select a main service provider for each of the populations at the project. I also want to highlight that the city of Chicago, despite being significantly larger than many communities across the country, still has not received the youth homelessness demonstration project. That was a key piece that helped the Ruth Ellis Center project actually be able to serve that population. So there's a huge need, and it's probably the focus of my work right now in terms of systems change at the city to look critically at the barriers that youth have in accessing permanent supportive housing systems. And then the final slide is where we're going on funding. So we're likely going to be mostly reliant on the city of Chicago's allocation of tax credits. The way that they allocate that is on a 2-year cycle, so we wouldn't be eligible for application until the end of 2024, early 2025. We're hoping to follow that shortly thereafter with state of Illinois youth permanent supportive housing funding. So it's probably going to be a similar mix to Ruth Ellis and Raymond Shepherd with LIHTC, Home, CDBG, maybe ARPA if they still have it, Housing Trust Fund, and then similar to the LA project, a large capital campaign. And I will leave it at that.
All right. Thank you so much, Carl. Again, another impressive project. We have run a little bit later on the program than we expected with all the presentations. I don't want to take up too much of people's time with the question period. So are there any questions in the chat? Do we have anything yet?
No, I'm not seeing anything in the chat.
Okay. And are there any questions that people have to hand in to us tonight? Okay. We did have a few questions that came in from people when they registered online. I think what we'll do is maybe go ahead and answer those offline and email those out to people. I think that's probably the most expedient thing to do. And then a couple of our curated questions will do the same thing, I think, too, so that we don't take up everyone's time right now. So, well, I want to thank everyone, all of our speakers for their very informative presentations. Thanks to all the attendees. We appreciate your presence and your interest. If you have additional questions that occur to you after the forum, have comments or suggestions, please feel free to email us at history@centralpalgbtcenter.org. That's history@centralpalgbtcenter.org. And we'll respond to those when we get them. You can also let us know through that email if you'd like to volunteer and join our task force. We'll be posting a recording of this forum and also the first forum, which I think is already posted online. And we'll send a link to all the people on the email list. So thank you all so much for participating and have a good evening.